Yes, and there we are again with a new episode of Jens. Today we're going to talk about movement quality and dynamic quality in dance and perhaps also in life in general. And I would never do that, of course, without my good friend and colleague Ton Greten, all the way from the Netherlands. Ton, are you there?
I'm there, Sean.
Yeah, I have an
Nice to hear you.
good to hear too. I have a topic for us movement quality and dynamic quality, and I put in dance, but I think that's also true for normal life. Now, definitely
Yeah,
movement
daily
quality,
life, daily life.
daily life. In life, yeah, daily life. Is there other life than daily life?
No,
Yes.
there isn't
So,
in life.
all right, yeah, there we are. Back again with another topic. Over the years, we already did quite a few topics, Tom.
Oh, yeah, I think about 50 now, something like that.
Something like that. And it's
Or
always dance
48.
related, of course, and it's always movement related
Yeah, and dance related,
and
movement
dance
related,
related, of course.
yes.
And today we're going to talk about movement quality and dynamic quality. Now, they're obviously not the same, otherwise we would not have mentioned them both, but one belongs maybe a little bit more to the other. So that's where we are.
Yeah, actually, you could put it in the highest priority movement quality, life quality, or life quality, movement quality, dynamic quality.
Yeah, quality of life, I think, is hugely influenced by the quality of movement. Yeah,
Yes,
yeah,
because you can have a movement and you have a dynamic. What dynamic is always movement, but dynamic or movement has not to be dynamical.
always some sort of a dynamical quality in any movement, but it's not per se defined, I would say.
No.
But yeah, I was thinking when we did the Dutch podcast, when we talk about quality of life and quality of movement, everyone who had once an injury or had and is normally very active in movement immediately feels that life changes when you, for instance, have an injury for a moment and you can move differently or less, or sometimes even not at all.
Yes, true, Sean. Actually, you could also say the life quality is, or your age is the damage what you have during your life.
Oh, yeah. Is it immediately damage?
A damage, yeah, a broken arm, is that not a damage? Or
A broken arm is, but age a
yeah,
damage? It's maybe a wear and tear. It's like a car. The older it gets, you see some wear and tear here and there.
yes.
That's even
But
life.
sometimes when you care for the car and you put it under or in the garage or you clean it every week and you go to the mechanical, to the auto
Yeah,
repair,
yeah.
yes, then it's okay. But it's a in a human being when you maybe we start with the beginning. What is actually a movement quality? Maybe we define these two words. I define it like, and I have it also in my book like that. It's the degree of control over a movement, control over form and dynamic. That's actually a movement quality. And the dynamic quality, I put it also there. The dynamic quality is the conscious alternation of the muscular tension between the 10 body parts of your body and the coordination them in such way to form a harmonious or disorient whole. So I have a little, what do you say, high fever?
Hay fever.
Hay fever, yes. I sound a little bit different than normally. And actually, the dynamic quality is less or more. You change constant a situation with your body parts, and the body parts have a muscle tension. We call that tonus, and the alternation of that muscle tension in these different body parts that makes it for a dancer dynamically. If you could keep in all body parts the same muscle tension constantly, then it would not dynamically anymore. Then it would be one tone, actually.
Yeah, but then it's maybe one dynamic which is not dynamical, of course. So in your definition in movement quality, there's the word control over it, huh? The quality of movement in the control.
Yeah,
You could also think about a new thing maybe for people to hear, the range of movement, the possibility of movements
the
in,
mobility.
yeah, which we also then have to define, of course, but what is mobility?
Yeah,
Yeah, the range of movement is of course a part of it, and dynamics actually even a more refining of all that.
yeah. And mostly as a dancer, hopefully, Sean, you use your awareness for it,
Yeah,
or your conscious. And when you are unconscious, mostly this happens too, when you are in your muscle memory, because you practice it so often that you repeat your movements or your choreography. But for us, it's always you have the brain must be faster than the body, and the brain, the captain of that ship for the proprioception, and proprio is your own property, your body, and ception is the perception of that body, how conscious you are of that body parts. And it is never a routine. You always be aware how much you use your body parts in which force or tension.
yeah. Another thing that came to mind is that in daily life, most of our movements are functional.
Yeah.
In dance, that doesn't have to be per se functional. It can be just we make a movement for a movement, and it can have a lot of dynamic quality, but it has no function other than the movement itself, which is of course a distinction between life, daily life, and dance, which we made. Did we do a specific? I think we had at least in the context of form, we had is it form before function or is it function before form? You could actually say the same thing about dynamic qualities, right?
Yes.
Is it, yeah, you could say that as well. That I don't think everyone ever said. Is a dynamic
No.
quality before function, or is it, we don't hear that, which is even more
Yeah.
weird
Correct,
because
Sean.
yeah, form is actually for us actually just it's always related, but it is just
It's static.
a moment in time. Yeah, if it's static, even becomes always a little bit weird.
And this is actually also the opposite of dynamic, the static
Yeah,
one.
yeah, that's really nicely said. The opposite of dynamic is static. That is, and I have to quote it really. I saw this quote, Tom, from Donna Schindler.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, a
Yes, a ballroom dancer.
a ballroom dancer, right? And she said, and I think it's actually it's too bad that I didn't say it in the Dutch podcast, but she said, when we are competing, our teachers never talked about the frame as it's called today. She said, and she competed about 40 years ago. The hold evolved with the development of posture and motion. Awareness of balance, space, and the role of the hold created great line. We weren't trying to move a static line. We weren't, yeah, to move a static line. We created line in motion. The hold has lost its function. It has become solely aesthetic. It doesn't have a who, when, how, or why, which is interesting. I have to, of course, explain who Donna Schindler was. But Donna Schindler was a ballroom dancer. She still is, but not active as a dancer, but more as a teacher now. But she was a quite a successful ballroom dancer. And in dancing, we had that in the podcast form. We have defined forms and we have free forms or dynamic forms. Yeah, in a ballroom dancer, we talk a lot about the form and the hold. And she actually said in her time, it was never only about the aesthetic, only about the static and the aesthetic hold, which is interesting actually, if you think about it.
What is aesthetic? Is that a subjective word, Sean?
It is a subjective word, yeah. Static is not a subjective word, but
Yeah.
aesthetic is, of course, a subjective word. But I think I know what she means. It's only about that one picture that she created, which is a short quote, of course. But interesting is that she felt that the halt was always created during the movement, and so it was always dynamic. The hold itself was dynamic, and that's a pretty interesting. That's a pretty interesting thing to say from a ballroom dancer in that time. And so it's definitely something, if I meet her, I definitely want to ask her a little bit more about that.
Yes. Actually, for me, it looks static, this ballroom hold. Now, in these days, it looks more dynamically because they change constantly that hold in the ballroom, and how the ladies are so much backward. That's really
Yeah,
incredible if
but
you
see,
compare it to 100 years ago. Quite straight, and also the head quite, everything quite symmetrically. Now it gets more asymmetrically,
yeah,
actually, in my opinion. Maybe you think they're different about it in
well,
the upper part of the body.
yeah, I was definitely immediately looking at some YouTube videos. Now, from those days, it's pretty hard to find actually good YouTube videos, but you can find them. I think what we see dynamically, but sometimes they try to keep the whole some parts of the body so static that they only move maybe the spine and keep the arm static. I could literally actually see what she meant with it. I also talked with some other dancers about it last week. It was there was a it was a, it's definitely a thing that is that true what she said, or I really want to know what she actually meant with it. But it was interesting
Mm.
to that part. The whole
Okay.
definitely has. So I only want to say that what we say here has been on the mind of dancers throughout the ages. Is it just an aesthetic form, which is subjective, obviously, or is
Yeah.
it something that you create while moving?
But of
And
course, you create it when you move the upper part of your body, but still you take it with your feet and with the in space in the direction you take it with you. So actually, if it would be no, for me it's still static. So you create that form at that one place. Maybe the head is turning, Sean, but no. But maybe if she give context to it, maybe I
yeah,
would
that's
understand it differently.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. So and then of course, when is a form change? So we talked about it as well. A minimal change can is already a change of form, obviously. Is it
yeah.
then obvious to audience and other people? And is it done consciously, or is it done Is it without doing any conscious? Then we call that a form. Then we break the form, right? If it's done
Yeah.
consciously, then it's slightly different. Do you morph in one or the other, which is then if it's so yeah, so many questions that we have about around people and the same thing. I think we try to define all these things a little bit stronger and deeper, and but in some dance forms like ballroom dancing, the hold, right, is has always been a really big topic of discussion. The frame, it has a function, but at the same time, it could look very static at the same time.
Yeah. Now these days, it's quite changed, Sean. That ballroom dancing, when I look to it, yeah. But yeah, it's still the same. But when we go back to our movement quality, Sean, maybe we can go back to the origin of it. What I mean with it, even your movement quality has already influenced before you're born. When you are in the bear mother, inside as a small child, you get the DNA of your parents, the chromosome, the hormones, etc. But if your mother is smoking, that has influence already of your movement quality when you get born. Even the alcohol, or when you are on drugs, or when you are overweighted and eat much things and sugar, you give it to your child constantly. Even if you move or not move as a parent, if you not move, it you transfer it to the child already, the unborn child. And this has a reflection for a later age. Of course, you can change that through your environment and through your training and your passion of movement, if it would be dance or walking or bicycling, etc. But still, you get already a fundament before you get really born. And when you get born, even the bacteria in the bear mother can the illness flu on a later age when that's quite positive with the bear mother, with the mother.
It's called a womb.
Yes,
The womb.
womb, yes. And when that's positive, yeah, you take it for your rest of your life. And it's already proved by the science that this has influence. And the movement quality during your life, that's so important to start on a young age to move already. If you are not get a movement, you have to make, how I call that, you have to do more on a later age to get it again, like you would start at the beginning already with movement. So it's quite important to move, but for all ages, from 0 till 120 years old. And the quality of life you have through the quality of movement. And some people not realize that we have the blue zones, like in Japan, and many people are 90 years old there, even 100 years, and they move a lot and they work every day, even when there are.
They is the people who live in the blue zones, but you have to explain what a blue zone is, Tom.
Okay, maybe you can explain that, Sean.
Okay, so yeah, because you said a lot in a few
Yeah, sorry.
sentences.
This
So
is, of course.
when a child is in the womb, it's already influenced how it later will move. Actually, it's already influenced before conceiving because it has to do a lot with the lineage, right? That people in, and then secondly, of course, and so what the mother eat and drinks and other intakes has a huge influence how the child later will and be able to move. Sometimes that ability is affected forever, right? Smoking has, for instance, can it be corrected later? Sometimes it is, sometimes it actually cannot. And of course, the environment that you grew up in and the way you grew up has a huge influence too. Uh, Is a child able to play a lot and move a lot when it's young and stimulated to move, by the way, which is also we can see in modern days now that not every child is actually stimulated to move. They are okay that specifically with boys just sit behind the computer the whole day and are less stimulated than when you and I grew up. We grew up on the streets, play soccer or whatever we did. That's what it is. And then Tom talked about if it comes to environment, it can even get more extreme, where we see that in some areas in the world they have a whole different style of living which is called blue zones, and one of the distinct differences is where in blue zones where people just naturally move more, and natural you have to take a little bit with a grain of salt here, is where everyone moves more. It's not per se natural, but it is more stimulated by the environment, let's put it that way, culturally more ingrained in how people move. So that's called the blue zone. So obviously, when the environment does that, then a child easier is either forced or just takes it over because you do what as a kid. And there are several blue zones in the world. Still a little bit arbitrary if that is 100% thing. People come up with these words, but culture changes super fast. Sometimes I read an article that the most happy childs in the world, also because of movement, by the way, are Dutch children. And one of the reason is because Dutch children are just, most of them just always go on a bicycle, which is true, right? A lot of Dutch children still go on a bicycle. And that's one of the reasons why they are so active. And the Netherlands is not part of the blue zone. So strangely enough, that's where they say that's where children are very happy and healthy. But these are more social based sciences. It's hard to define how that is. But it's interesting to see these connection between these zones. For sure. For sure.
Yes, in that blue zone, Sean, where they have a few things what they're doing there. They eat differently, no fast food, and when they eat not 100% till they are full, but they eat till 80%. So before they get full, they stop already. Another thing is they work even after 60, 70 years. So they're still working with 80,
Hmm.
constantly moving. That's important. And also, I heard now in another podcast, quite interesting today, even when you're studying, not standing with study, but even moving by study. So if you are walking by your study, you already learn more faster in your brain, but also with your body, because the blood goes through your veins, through your body, through the veins in the brain, and they're always stimulated. When you are not moving, it keeps less more than 15 minutes this activity of stimulating the blood through your veins. And that's quite positive. I didn't know that also. I know it's important to move before you have an exam or you have a test on school, but actually you learn with your body and you learn with your brain. And this is actually what quite happened naturally in Japan. They eat their own vegetables, what they put in their garden, that's also different. We go to the supermarket and mostly there are pesticide in it. That's also not so healthy in a supermarket, but the product keeps longer and it's more fresh than but with the poison on it. So actually, it has all influence on your movement quality. Only we are not so aware of it. And then we go practice, and there are some issues why the other one is stronger or more flexible or don't smoke. Because even why you smoke, it could be that your parents smoked also before. And to get smoking, then it's more stimulated already before. Sean. You told it also already in the Dutch podcast with alcohol and with other things.
Yeah, I can easily, strangely enough, see. I'm in a family of. I was born in a family of 8 children. My mom never smoked and doesn't drink any alcohol, but my dad does. But the strange thing is that from a movement point of view, my dad was very active until a very late age, like in his 90s. He was at some point in time, he had a walker, right? And he was using his walker as an exercise thing. So he was very active. My mom actually was the opposite, strangely enough. And then if you look at the children, at my siblings, then you can see that some take a little bit more from my dad if it comes to movement, at least, and are very active in the movement. Now, could you per se say that the people who are moving, the sample would also be too small, have a higher quality of life? That's of course because there is a little bit of subjectivity in there, but I think I dare to say that, yeah, that there is, specifically at a later age, the people who have moved their whole life, their mobility is just stays with them way longer. That is clear. Sometimes you cannot see the difference at a younger age, but at a later age, because it goes a little bit like this, you could definitely see that. The influence of smoking. I said once to my dad, said, but I was a great sports guy my whole life and I smoked. I said, the question is not how well are you when you were smoking, how well would you have been if you did not smoke? And he was pretty heavy on the alcohol too. Same thing. Said, how heavy were you if you did not smoke? So there you have, they have that. I was always thinking I smoked in it. Did you ever smoke, Tom? I never. You're on mute, Tom.
I never smoked, Sean, and I never drink alcohol. Maybe a few times in my life, maybe once a year. I will not exaggerate it.
Yeah, but was
In a
there
good mood,
smoking
maybe
around?
twice a year.
Yeah,
No, no, smoke. Yes, when people smoke in environment, I try to go in a different place because I don't want to get the poison in me, what somebody breathe out. I don't want to get in me. And sometimes that's in the Netherlands not okay. I would rather live in Canada where you cannot smoke on the in the outside and not for a hospital, not in a restaurant outside. I think it's a quite super rule. But no, I never smoked, never alcohol. I drink no lemonade. I drink only water and tea. When I was young, I drank a lot of Coca-Cola and Pepsi and all the brands, Fanta and etc. It's but there is so much sugar in it, and I realized how much sugar was in it. I had during my life when I was 55 something or 50, around 50 years, 10 years ago, I'm 60, I had 10 kilogram overweight. I don't know what is in it's a
pounds.
20 pound
That's a little bit more than
overweight.
20, but about 20 pounds. It's good
Yeah,
enough.
yes.
Yeah.
But I realized I want to get them off. So I'm the last years on 64, then I go to 63, 62, and now I'm between 62, 61. The last 3 years I was 63, 64, but I try to work on it that I'm 1 meter 72 and I try to get at least 10 kilo off that I'm 62, and that would be in the BMI, the body mass index would be quite most positive, and I feel the best with me. And the fat is around my stomach, it's gone, and I'm quite happy with that one. And that this gives me more movement quality, even with my power training and my mobility training. And of course, I eat sugar, and but I try to do it a little bit more in the weekend, but less during the weekend. And so I'm realized myself if I want to have my movement quality on a in the older age, like 70 years in 10 years, or in with 80 years in 20 years, I have to do something now and not when I get 70.
For sure.
Then, of course, when you start then, it's still okay. And also the dimension what you can get and Parkinson is also coming from not moving, your food, also from when you cannot hear. When you not can hear anymore on a later age and you have disabled or can hear not everything, better is to take some instruments what can help you better hear. And it proved by the science already that the dimension and Parkinson also has influence on that one and with the movement, etc. So I would say if you are a dancer, keep really, if you are even on a higher level, professional dancer, you have to consider all things because that's your fundament, your movement quality. And from there, you can go over to your dynamic quality, where we will speak later when Sean also is finished with the movement quality. So this is quite important to see this as a fundament, your movement quality, and it has to do which water you get into your, how much sun you have, how much you are in the outside, how much you move, your food, yes, and where you take the products for your body. So you have only one body, and realize what you get in that body is also mostly what you get out from it.
Yeah, it's coming from software coding, but in software coding, we say garbage in is garbage out, right? So the same thing you could say about the body. It's influenced, first of all, by sleep, right? And then secondly, by the nutritional input, drink, food, and what you drink. Of course, also the movements that you make, exercise. We have to exercise now because most of our professions are not so much movement as in the past. The quality of air that you have and the amount of time that you spend outside in healthy air, preferable, that has a huge influence. And also, of course, how you think about things. We know that there is a direct correlation between how your mental capacity is and your movement capacity, and it goes both way, by the way. Your mental capacity changes when you change the way you move and the other way around, so that goes both ways. But all these things have an influence on the movement quality. And I think what Ton tried to say is, if you can practice as a dancer as much as you want, but if your basic components that we just mentioned are actually lacking, then you should start there first before you think about dynamic qualities and specific dance movement quality. It has less of influence if you have not your basic qualities, if you don't think about it, sleep, all these things that we just mentioned. And
Yeah.
sometimes we see that people do all their best, but they keep eating bad, and then it's hard.
This the strange thing is, Sean, we know it. Most of the people know that, but they don't do it because it's comfortable. And when it's comfortable, then it's relaxed and easy. But make it yourself difficult and try to make a better version from yourself to change your habits. And the day after, you work again on that habit. And the day after, and the day after. And then it get a new habit again. But this is how you can develop that. And sleeping, yes, that's really important. I forget it always, but I know how important it is because I try every day to catch my sleep because that's a reset for your body. And of each element, what we said, food, movement, sleeping, that has all influence on your movement quality. But you could also make a podcast from each subject of that what we where we spoke about it, Sean. It's quite interesting, and you can go more in the depths of the food, of the nutrition, of the sleeping, because it's so much to say about it. But to keep it quite compact, you have maybe five, six things where you have to think about in your daily life to get a better movement quality. It's not so complicated. The most high one is, of course, the movement. but still the rest is quite also important as a holistic approach.
Yeah, it's if you think about and talk about it, then everyone understands it. So you wonder why then not everyone is doing it. I think it has a lot to do with what's accepted nowadays. It's also the surrounding that you put yourself into, right? You want to be an entrepreneur,
Yeah,
put yourself in a surrounding of entrepreneurs.
yeah,
You want to be a mover, then put yourself there. So to put yourself consciously in the highest possible environment. So there's this saying that I always liked. I had never tracked down who is the first one who said it, but maybe I can find it. But if you feel that you are the smartest in the room, then you are in the wrong room. Does that make sense? If
yeah.
you if
That's a
you are
nice one, Sean.
yeah, if you are the best mover in the room, you are in the wrong room. You should put yourself in a room where other people can still stimulate you to improve yourself. And so that's I think I always kept that in mind as a young dancer. I with the luck of a draw, at that time we had quite a few good dancers, and good is very relative, right? But at least experienced dancers in the Netherlands. And I didn't even know that, Tom. I just went there where you also went. I went to Alphen aan the Rijn, and a lot of international dancers, which I had no clue who they are, and I actually also cared less who they are. I just saw that they moved quite well. Does that make sense? And I felt in the beginning I felt a little bit awkward, and then I thought, oh wow, that's interesting. And I had the same thing with martial art. I just looked for where in my country were the best fighters, and that is something that I think I inherited from my dad. Is that you want to be good at
Yeah,
something, put yourself next to someone who's better than you. And better is of course subjective, but in this context maybe that's a good way to say it. Hence I always like the quote, if you are the smartest in the room, smartest can be replaced by all the other things, you are in the wrong room. And
yeah, that's a quite nice one, Sean.
yeah, more
I'll,
stimulants,
well,
right? Yeah.
yes, this is why it's so strange that we not find enough people around us. There are in the world, in the dancing world, they think like we think, but I cannot find them yet. They are so busy in their box sometimes. I think, oh, there's so much more in that box. Would be nice to have a jam community. I have on WhatsApp, and I'm quite happy with our group, 60 people around the world. And and we hope through our knowledge that we can bring them on the level where we are now in our thinking. It's not a level of good or wrong, but on the level of thinking of the same terminology. How and that's how and
It's
this has also influence on the movement quality, but also on the dynamic quality. And yeah, maybe we can slowly go to the dynamic quality, Sean, or you have something to say about the movement quality still?
no, because remember, the time goes fast.
Yeah.
Like we
So
had in
we
our we already on 45 minutes. But yeah, there
oh
are
wow.
dynamic quality has you already said it has a lot to do with tonus. Maybe you can speak a little bit more about muscle tonus because that's not a very common understood word. So
Also not in English, Sean?
no, we say maybe muscle
Okay.
tension, but tonus as a word, yeah, some people know what it is, but actually how to use that and why it has so much influence on the dynamic of movement, not so much. Yeah.
Yeah. When we come to the first sentence of dynamic and the definition how I defined it, and you also, it's a constantly change of a situation. As a dancer, which situation you can change, that's your instrument, that ship, that body, that vehicle where you drive it. And the captain is in the brain, and that is steering that body, but also vice versa. And so that's a constant change of a situation from the body parts with the muscle, with a certain of muscle tension. And it will not say when you make composed movement with 4 or 5 body limbs, then it will not say that you have the same muscle tension in all that body parts, that you have the same muscle tension. So that would be quite weird. But when I look to dancers sometimes, I think, why are they not so defined to make more small difference to one body part to the other body part? And if I would be focused on it, I would love to see it when somebody is soft with their fingers and maybe hard with their feet. Yeah, that would be really wonderful. And also, what I know, Sean, that's also science proved that during the years, is that 25% of your body parts is used by the hands. And that's quite a lot, 25 to 30%. And that's a quarter of it, almost a third. And that's really impressive. Yes, of course, the other body parts has function too, but mostly in the Latin and also in the ballet, we give a lot of attention to the feet and to the legs and to the body weight transfer. And is it turned out or is it straight or extended, how they call it in ballet, and rotated to the outside or not to the inside mostly, but to the outside. That's quite interesting. Also, in the ballet, they gave more attention to the arms and the legs. But if you look to hip hop, they use more the upper part of the body, more the head, the shoulder, the chest isolations, the hip isolation, the finger isolation, the hand isolation, the arm isolation. That's shoulders. That's quite nice to see. Sometimes they are more static, and sometimes they give in the rhythmical interpretation, give more attention to the feet. And when we go to the dynamic qualities, we can mention maybe we can start with the dynamic qualities. I will mention it later because I'm talking now a lot. Sean, you have something to say on what I said?
No, you mentioned the good things, a good segue into the different type of dynamic qualities. Typically, we talk about five, six different dynamic qualities that we distinct, but that's of course a system. You can come up with more or less, doesn't really matter so much. But yeah, so that's it. So what I think is interesting, what you said, that also in the literature of the dance style that we sometimes talk about, the ballroom dancing, there's a lot of literature around only how the foot move and the positions of the feet without mentioning anything, while you just said that 25% of the movements that we make are made by our hands, that's a lot. That's one fourth of the movements that we make, and that probably is research in daily life and not in dance life. And of course, every style goes into a slightly different way. But yeah, there are specific dynamic qualities, and typically we talk about six, seven. You have percussive movements, swinging movements. We have collapse movement, vibratory movements.
Quaking,
Yeah, yeah, movement. And
prolonging,
prolonging, which is a sustained, suspended movement as a prolonging. So every of these high categories that I mentioned has smaller things under there as example,
subcategories, yes.
subcategory as things. And in some dance styles, percussive movements are a little bit more used, and in other, like hip hop, vibratory movements are often when they do that ticking. We don't know that in ballroom dancing. Someone might do it,
No,
but
yes, that's quite interesting. What
super
muscle
interesting.
tone, yeah, what muscle tone has ticking, and when you do popping
Yeah,
or bopping, that's again a different trick, strobing, all these different words has a different muscle tension in ticking and a different tempo also in it and a different
duration.
duration between the ticks.
Yeah,
And that's quite interesting. But of course, we are in a certain, how we say, time now where we're living. that fusion comes more and more in our dancing, and we are influenced from all. And also in the ballroom, you could take ticking in it, and ticking in two bodies symmetrically, but you could also take asymmetrically in the body. That's quite interesting to do that in a different style. But also in the hip hop or in belly dance, if you take a fusion from the other dance, sometimes that happened, and it's quite interesting because when you are in that box of ballet dance, you are influenced constantly with ballet, but there comes a small influence also from other dance forms in it, even when you are not realize that, because the ballet looks not 100 years ago, and the same like ballroom and Latin dance don't looks like 75 years ago. So it's changing. And when I look to the posture hold for the ballroom dancing, it's so much changed from 1923 till now, 100 years later. But still, you cannot give a, how is that, a judgment to it, because there has their qualities for that time. And if you put the quality and time back, that would look weird what we do now. If you put the quality what you did then to here in this time, that would be weird too, look weird too, because they are not used to that quality. But at the end is what has a dancer to say with that dynamic quality, what he put into that. And the posture hold, what I said, that's a constant hold to keep that form. And that's a, if you can look to, that's actually also a quality to hold that one. But for me, that's more static. And of course, it breathes and it react on it. But still, it's quite interesting to see how it was 100 years ago. And
Yeah,
some things, what I see now from the 30s, Sean, what they did with how they call hip hop, but not Lindy hop. When I see that, that's quite fascinated. And also with the tap dancing, I would say in the earlier times, that was really fascinated how they did it then. Complete. I'm really, when I look to that old videos, I'm so inspired how they use their dynamic qualities, and impresses sometimes what a human body are able to do at that time. And I don't see it anymore back in this time, because we totally influence also through the other dynamic qualities of other dance forms, and through our movement qualities also, because when we could turn, that's a composed movement, actually turning the feet doing tick tick tick, the head do tick 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 in a slower tempo, and the body do three different dynamic qualities in sound, but also in movement. When you look 100 years ago, you could make one turn, that was already incredible, or two. Now they do 20 turns. That's when you look at the extreme ones, it's 10, 7, 8. That's already quite okay. But there are people that can turn endless and they have balance. That's oh, incredible.
yeah, that's strange that it can go two direction, right? Specifically, the forms of Lindy Hop that you mentioned. Also, the tap dancing of ages ago was at a, yeah, at a different level that you actually seldomly still see because tap is becoming less and less popular. But Lindy Hop, from a physicality point of view, not only from a dynamic point of view, whoa, that is almost acrobatic to what extent those people moved. Strangely enough, in the ballroom dancing, it looked weird now. But I always say to my students, how weird it looks is can you do it? Because it has always to do with choice, right? And so the fact that a movement is maybe not popular doesn't mean that you don't have to practice it, right? Because it is always, can you do it? Then you can always decide. If you do it just because you are limited in your dynamic qualities, then it's not a choice anymore, right?
Yes, I remember, Sean, you work in a studio in Dallas, and you did a time that you did salsa and you did Argentinian tango. I don't know if you did other dance forms there, swing or something like that. But quite interesting, Sean, that you did that because the vocabulary and dynamic qualities what they use, it's a little bit different than where you're coming from the Latin dance. And that's quite impressive that you did that because you did that recently, a few years ago. Maybe you did it a longer time ago, but you picked it up and also how they speak about dancing. So you hear the difference in the terminology, how they use it in the dynamic qualities, how we use it. We have a quite definition for it and what each dynamic quality mean in the wording also of the terminology and where the etymology coming from the word. That's also so quite important, but they do their thing. You are in the lessons to discover more and to develop more. How you experience that one, this quite different dynamic qualities in that one, Sean?
Yeah, I tend to go to any class that I can go to just for fun, right? It could even be country and western dancing, which is quite popular here in Dallas, in Texas in general. What I discovered here, and this is not an intensive research, so if you follow the definitions that Ton and I use in GEM, and if it comes to dynamic qualities, then I tend to think that the more street developed dances, in this case, what we call street dances like salsa, like West Coast swing, yeah, they do quite impressive movements, but it is from often from a rhythmical point of view quite boring if it comes to dynamic qualities. They move in the same cadence the whole time, which is not a bad thing. It sounds like a bad thing, but they want to change partners very quickly, so they have some sort of a common ground to communicate. Now, the Latin in our studio is at a pretty beginners level, but I also work with other, and we do a lot of variations in set choreography where we actually try to find a different dynamic. So it's not so spontaneous anymore because we practice it. So you see that the people who do Latin specifically and ballroom in our style get more variety. That's a better word than better. More variety in the dynamic qualities. And I must say that, but it's very personal, is in the Argentine tango. Yeah, you see the same thing. People who do it more on a social level, they tend to stay in the same dynamic qualities. And the people who try to make it a little bit more in an artistic way, they try to find different dynamic qualities. So that's an interesting thing, not better or worse. It is just variety of dynamic qualities. That's my short conclusion, requires practice and research and a lot of trial and error. If you ask for it to come spontaneously, we tend to default in what we are comfortable with. Now you are a different example, Tom, because you have practiced this so often that you can spontaneously do a lot of dynamic differences and qualities. But most people not there. You have to come to a pretty well trained dancers if they can spontaneously make all these variations.
Yeah, but for me, it's a hobby, Sean, to discover
I know,
more variety in these dynamic qualities. And actually, a quality in the dynamic, it's actually a requirement. When I speak about swing,
I agree.
then it's the requirement of the swing, the terminology of it, and the understanding of that word. If that is not the same what you think and I think, then the swing would already from the look different from the dynamic quality, maybe in tempo or in softness or etc. So each quality, if it would be ticking, popping, bouncing, it needs a definition. And when the definition is there, you could all dynamic qualities if you defined it and you have the terminology of it, you could put and implement it in your dancing.
For sure.
It's really because you have an option, and when you have an option, you can choose. But if you can not choose and you not understand the definitions from it, then you work more from a feeling how it feels. But if you build up knowledge and you try to build that into that knowledge to the movement knowledge, and then you develop that requirement to a quality, then you have more variety in it.
Yeah, for
And
sure. Yeah.
yes, and you can teach that also more easily because you follow not your teacher or the people where you had lessons from and you repeat what they said. Try to discover what the qualities means, and you have maybe hundreds of them. So it's actually also hundreds of explanation of it and put them down. But I don't have find any book where all these qualities are defined, because think about it. Each different word has a different movement quality. So if you discover a new word, actually you discover also a new movement quality or a dynamic quality. It depends how you use it. And how more conscious you about it are, then how more you can make from that option a choice. And then that makes it personal, in my opinion, and that makes it extraordinary characteristic, and you will get out of that group. It's
Yeah,
not
well,
only
for sure.
just follow your feeling.
No, I think that's where the main difference comes in. I think, Tom, is that what you often hear and like I said, it's just one studio and it's nothing to say anything about people, but they often go from only what they feel and not what they know. Good example is always is if you think in the vibratory quality, the difference between ticking, vibrating, strobing, you can say it, but if you try to do it only with your hand and people can see it, oh, we see it. Once you define it for yourself, then you already that's already three. But in that area alone, there are so many differences that, for instance, in the ballroom, no one speaks about that. If it comes to swinging, we often think only going in a pendulum movement. There is way more to swinging than that, which is very much related to our dance form. So you are absolutely
Yes.
right. If you don't define it, doesn't have to be exactly the same definition as we do, by the way, but and you don't explore it, you don't add anything to your toolbox, and therefore, because if you dance from only your feeling, it always will be limited.
Yeah, and the conscious choice of it makes that you are more captain of it. And you can, that's quite important to do. What I also want to say, practice each different dynamic quality in each body part, singular. And then try to practice them also composed symmetrically in more body parts, like head and arms together, or head and shoulder together. And composed body part, we mean we have 10 body parts in the jam. One body part is singular. Using two body parts or more than one body parts, it's already composed. And if you practice these dynamic qualities, you can make a huge difference in it. And if you put them symmetrically in your body part in the composed, or you put them asymmetrically in the body part. And for a next podcast, we will do also a number two about dynamic qualities. And yes, so important to use that different muscle tones in the different body parts and change that constantly, then it gets dynamic. So I put it in a different way now.
Yeah, we are way over the hour, so we have to stop this. But yeah, maybe on hindsight, on we should make a podcast about movement quality and a second on dynamic quality specific.
Yes.
So much, still so much to say. If I only look at my notes, and I'm sure you have the same about dynamic qualities. But yes, we are way over the hour. And so let's save that for another time. I always would say that it's interesting. We're getting to the interesting, juicy part, but I always say that. But so, yeah, Tom, thank you for sharing your knowledge, of course, with us
You also, Sean.
about life and about movement quality and dynamic quality. We scratch the surface only on the dynamic quality.
Yes. And they are connected. Think about the one cannot without the other one.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. This was another episode of Dance Gems, right? A good introduction to music, after music to movement, and that's another quality, by the way. Movement and dynamic quality. Yes, Tom, I hope to see you next time, of course, in another episode of Dance Gems. A follow up of this is definitely coming soon, I would say. What about you?
Yes, I would love that to speak about it. Because the dynamic quality, most people think only in fast and slow.
Yes,
So we
yes,
will keep them out
yeah,
of that dream that it's only fast and slow.
yeah. All right, Tom, I'll see you next time.
Yes,
And this was Ton and Jar with another episode of Dance Gems, movement quality and dynamic quality in dance and maybe in daily life. Who knows? I'll start the music and I'll say already bye bye.
goodbye until next time.
Till next time. Yes, there was another episode of Dance Jam and the vast knowledge and experience that Ton has. Always nice to explore. Dance Dash Jams, Apple Dance Dash Jams, YouTube, and of course we have our own podcast, www.jam.dance/podcast. And last but not least, we also are on Facebook and many more channels lately. And this was the Dance Jams. Bye bye.
Goodbye.